Good Monday afternoon. This is Micah Mitchell with Madison County Weather Updates. I want to try to do a quick video for you. Hopefully start doing some more videos. I keep saying that, but it's just difficult with the amount of time I'm spending at work. I'm also I'm going to try to put my face on here a little bit more just because I feel like maybe I've become a faceless, kind of voiceless abstract entity, and maybe that's part of what's driving the decline in subscriptions to the page and support for the page. So especially as we're getting closer to the winter, I'm going to have to make a decision about whether to go on into 2026, ask for sponsors to renew and all that. So I want to try to really put in a good effort here in the next month or so and see if we can get things going back the right way again, because I know the economy is difficult, and then the weather's been boring, and you know probably the page has become boring. So I'm going to try to rectify that. But at any rate, we've actually got something to talk about with the weather. Very brief, but we do at least have a system in place. So let's take a look at that real quick. So here's a pretty zoomed out view of the radar across the eastern United States, and we've got two things going on. We've got this low pressure system down here in the south that's trying to track to the northeast, and then we've got this front back here that's going to kind of press in toward this low pressure system. So the big question is, does this get caught up with this front and give us a little better rain, or does this do like some of the high resolution data shows, and as this front approaches, the low kind of makes a turn and just kind of puts us on the outskirts? I'll zoom in the radar real quick, and we'll take a look at what's going on, because we do have some rain trying to move up through the state right now. This is about 10 after 1 as I'm starting this video. So we can see that we've got precipitation trying to creep up in here. Of course, Anderson's right up in here. So we just got real patchy showers trying to develop on the north side of this, and we can see some of the energy down here. And you can see as it comes north, it then begins to make that turn to the east. So that's the thing we're going to have to watch as the main low pressure approaches and as the cold front approaches, is how is this going to come together? Is this going to come together for, pardon me, that's phone deciding people know when to call junk mail. I think we're all getting a bunch of spam calls these days. But at any rate, the question is going to be, does this come together with the front and give us some decent rain, or is it going to be really patchy the way some of the high resolution data is showing? Here's the issue with the high resolution data. You just saw the radar image, and there's a decent amount of patchy rainfall in the area. Um, this is the HRRR model. The NAM 3K also is doing the same thing, and that is that they're not really picking up this early patchy precipitation. They're only picking up some of the heavier cells to the south. So that may be something that we need to watch. They're also not doing a very good job picking that front up back out to the west. So hopefully we can squeeze a little more rain out of this than what some of the data is showing. My forecast was for a widespread quarter to half inch of rain with maybe some localized higher amounts if somebody can get under a good cell. I'm going to leave that way, but I'll show you kind of what the data is doing with this. So we'll just progress through this HRRR model, and you can see here's by 5 p.m. It's beginning to bring a little more organized precipitation up. But watch, right here is I-70. Anderson and Muncie's right up in here. So watch what happens with this as it progresses through. You can see there's maybe some decent cells coming through in the early evening hours, but then the majority of the precipitation begins to fade off to the southeast of us just a little bit. And then we get this kind of gap in the overnight hours. And then tomorrow you can kind of see the outer band of the low pressure, and then here's the front. And you can see it wants to leave this gap between them and not really bring these together. And most of the data is doing that. It just gives us some patchy precipitation. Then eventually, here's by early tomorrow afternoon, it finally begins to get most of the precipitation out. by late tomorrow afternoon. So that's kind of what's happening with this. So I'll show you what it looks like as a total QPF. So here's the high resolution rapid refresh model, and you can see it leaves this gap basically between about Lafayette and Kokomo for sure, but it's got Madison County picking up maybe a tenth to some maybe picking up a yes, 8/10 of an inch, and then most of us picking up between a quarter and a half. But it's this patchy, again, just high localized high amounts possible. We got to keep that in mind. But it really, depends on timing of everything. If all of this comes a little farther north, we could get some heavier rain. Right now, it's keeping heavy rains in south of I-70. But if it all fades a little bit more to the southeast, then we could get very little in the way of rain. So we're just gonna have to wait that out and see how that works out. You I kind of feel like that the quarter to half inch idea is the correct idea for Madison County. But just know that again, as it seems to be the case with absolutely everything that comes through here, 30 miles one way we get a lot, 30 miles another way we get next to nothing. That just seems to be our lot in the uh, weather category. So that's just kind of what we're looking out for with this rainfall amount. Then once this rain gets past here, this will bring in cooler temperatures. We've already cooled down some today. We're probably not going to hit 80 today. If we do, we'll barely hit 80, kind of like yesterday. And then 80 degrees is probably going away. I'm not going to say for good because we're always good for an 80-degree day all the way into early November. But it really looks like 80 degrees is going to become pretty scarce. But all it takes is a tropical system to throw a wrench into that. And so we'll keep those options open. But it does look like we're going to go through a period where we're at least going to drop down to the 70s with a couple of days in the 60s. Here's a look at the National Weather Service blend of models. And yeah, you can see it's only got us, getting into the mid 70s tomorrow, which is what I've got. It drops us down to the mid 60s Wednesday and Thursday. Look at these lows Thursday morning and Friday morning, in the mid to upper 30s. Thursday morning, I would say we got a risk for some outlying frost in areas that are low and sheltered from the wind, but it may still be a bit breezy at Thursday morning. You need a touch of a breeze, just enough to move the air. But if there's very much wind, then yeah, it makes it more difficult for frost to develop. Friday morning, the winds are probably going to be really calm. So Friday morning, I think, is the greater risk for our first widespread frost. But even at that, if the wind direction turns a little bit where it comes, where our winds come from off of Lake Michigan instead of from the west northwest, then we would be warmer and potentially have a little cloud cover. So we're gonna have to see how the winds are setting up with that. But just know that Thursday morning, outlying areas could see some frost. Friday morning is potential for all of us to, or vast majority of us, to see some frost, except maybe in the city of Anderson or inside the city of Elwood. And even at that, some of those areas, if they're more sheltered, could still pick up some frost. So we'll see as that gets a little closer, and then the highs go back into the 70s. I don't see any reason to disagree with that. We'll take a look at the GEFS model, kind of the same thing, dip into the 60s, back into the 70s, and you can see it just slowly glides down as we head later in the month. And we'll take a look at the EPS model as well. Same thing, couple of days in the 60s, back into the 70s, then back down to the 60s. So at least with data right now, it does look like the 80s are going to go away, at least for the foreseeable future. But keep in mind, these days in the 70s, they are all warmer than average. Our average high right now in Anderson is 68. So anything above that is warmer than average. So as you see some of these maps, temperature anomaly maps that look like it's going to be hot, that's really not going to be hot. It's just going to be warmer than average. Mid to upper 70s again. That's anywhere between 5 and 10 degrees warmer than average for this time of year. And as we get later in the month, by the end of the month, I think our average highs are down around 60, maybe upper upper 50s. So then the mid 60s become warmer than average. So keep that in mind as average temperatures cool down. These anomaly maps that you might see that make it look like a torch, that's all relative to average. It doesn't mean that we're going to be hanging out in the 80s for the next month. So here's a look at my 7-day forecast. Not much has really changed. I did go ahead and cool, Wednesday night, Thursday night down a little bit. But even at that, again, with a little shift of the wind, we could stay up more around 40 degrees. And again, in a couple of the larger towns in Anderson, in Elwood, we might still stay closer to 40 in town on those mornings, but still much cooler than what we've been experiencing for the last month. So while this October is going to run warmer than average, it's not going to be nearly as warm as what we've been experiencing the last few Octobers. And again, we'll have those couple of days in the 60s, then bounce back into the 70s. And then our lows will be hanging out mostly in the 40s, couple mornings in the 30s. But again, look at our average low. This has been the interesting thing that's been going on with this dry air, with the drought. Dry air warms very freely and it cools very freely. So we've had a lot of days where the high temperature is 10 or 12 degrees warmer than average, and then the low temperature is cooler than average. So, that's just kind of one of those interesting things with our pattern. And this is probably going to continue. As you see, our average high 69, average low 48. Most of these lows are cooler than average, but most of the highs are warmer than average. So we're going to continue that. So we're going to, I might update this a little bit, but this is probably the 7-day forecast you're going to see here in a little bit. So we're going to take a look at one more thing, just way down the road, just for the giggles. Dr. Ryan Malway, very successful meteorologist. He runs weathermodels.com. He did put this out yesterday, and so we'll go ahead and take a look if I can do the right thing here. This is the Europeans' seasonal snowfall for going from beginning at October 1st, going on through the snow season. And so, I mean, you got to take it with a grain of salt, but nonetheless, this is the average, the ensemble mean average. So this is taking all of its ensembles, all 51 of them, and putting them together, and this is kind of what they average out to. And it would put, Anderson and Madison County somewhere in the, Delaware County, somewhere in the, 25 to 30 inch range for the winter, which would be above our average. It's got northern Indiana, up around 40 inches, but that's actually below some of their averages. So, again, you got to take this with a grain of salt, but it does look like this is going to be a snowier and colder winter than we've had in, at least in a couple of years, last 2 years. We average in Anderson historically average about 20 inches of snow for the winter season. And the last 2 years we've had less than 15. So, anything's going to be probably better than what we've had the last 2 winters. And it does look like this will probably jump off a lot quicker than what our last few winters have done. We may actually start seeing snow in December, accumulating snows in December and cold in December. Whereas we've gotten a couple of snows in December the last few years, but it's basically been pretty warm until we got into January. Doesn't look like that's going to be the case this year. But again, all it takes is one thing to throw a wrench into the pattern, and you can mess winter up. And last snow-related thing here, again from weathermodels.com. This is the European 45-day snowfall outlook. This goes through November 16th. And you can see it begins to bring some snowfall down well into the CONUS, but it does, at this point leave Indiana out through mid-November. Again, I've got no reason to argue with that. I think our snow season is probably going to kick in, after Thanksgiving this year. We've had some snows in October the last couple of years, but that also ended up pointing to it, leading to a torch or torch of a winter and a lack of snow in the winter. So I think we're going to do better to see more sustained cold set in a little later in the season instead of having transient cold and snow earlier in the season. So if you're a snow lover, I still feel pretty good about this winter. But again, all it takes is one driver to mess that up, and so we'll wait and see how things develop. But it's always fun to take a look, well out into the future. Right now, we're struggling just to do well with forecast and temperatures, inside of 7 or 8 days. So, but it's fun to look at. So this video's gone on way too long. If you support this page financially, thank you so much. Thank you so much to our sponsors who do so. This Facebook page has 19,138 followers last time I looked, and we have 38 people who are supporting the page financially. So if you haven't and you can, please do so. Please help it. Help me keep this thing going. And if things continue to drop off the way they have been, then I may have to reconsider going into 2026. But so you can find all the information for how to donate at the top of the X page and at the top of the Facebook page. For followers on X, I've been paying for a premium subscription on there so I could give you the full text and give you the longer videos like this one directly to X. Effective November 2nd, I'm just going to go down to just a regular subscription there, and stop paying that fee for that, because right now I can't afford to do so. So if something changes, I can always change it back. But right now, November 2nd will be the end of getting these longer videos directly to the page. They'll be uploaded to YouTube. I'll share the link to that. But as far as direct to X, November 2nd, it's just going to become a regular page, 280 character limit, 2-minute video limit on there. So I hate to do that, but that's the way things are going right now. So again, Micah Mitchell, Madison County Weather Updates. Thank you for supporting this page. Thank you for trusting it with your weather. And hopefully we can turn the page on this. And hopefully for snow lovers, we can have a decent snowy winter this year. My take is, if it's going to be cold, it needs to snow. If it's not going to snow, then it might as well be warm. So that's my personal take on it. So have a great day, and I will try to do more videos for you. Thank you.